way to go to force people to pay a lot of money to receive information that relates to how public monies are being handed out around this province. And Madam Speaker, we know that the NDP government has now been characterized as being, surprisingly, almost astoundingly, as a government of corporate handouts. Whoever would have thought? I noticed, Madam Speaker, in the throne speech the other day, the government felt they had to say that they still stand true to their values, because nothing they have done in the last 4 years really has reinforced any of the values that people associated with the NDP. And that's why this bill, Bill number 1, is calling for more transparency. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now recognize the Deputy House Leader for the Official Opposition. Deputy House Leader for the, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. That concludes the business for the Official Opposition for today. I'll now turn it over to the Government House Leader.
Thank you. Recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, tomorrow the hours will be from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. And after the daily routine and question period, we'll be doing address and reply, speech from the throne. I wish you now rise to meet at the hours of 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. tomorrow.
Thank you. The motion is that we do now rise to meet again tomorrow, March the 28th, between the hours of 11 a.m. and 3 p.m. All in favour say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion is carried. We've arrived at the moment of interruption, and I now call under a motion under Rule 5.5, the late debate, as submitted by the Honourable Member for Hammonds Plains Upper Sackville, which reads, therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House agree that the Liberal Party's opposition to clean Atlantic Canadian power from Muskrat Falls is in the best interest of the world's 4th largest energy utility, Hydro-Quebec, and not Nova Scotian families. I now recognize the Honourable Member for Hammonds Plains Upper Sackville.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Madam Speaker. Thank you very much. Glad to rise, speak on this motion that I put forward today. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House agree that the Liberal Party's opposition to clean Atlantic Canadian power from Muskrat Falls is in the best interest of the world's 4th largest energy utility, Hydro-Quebec, and not Nova Scotia families. Madam Speaker, I've had the opportunity over the past number of weeks to go around the province with the Minister of Energy talking about the province's plan for lower fare rates for Nova Scotians. And Madam Speaker, I want to take us back to how we got to where we are today, and that is the fact that for the longest time, and I've said this many times in this House, about the expensive regime that we've been under the Conservatives and Liberals of tying ourselves to coal. Madam Speaker, one of the things the history books have told us was that in 1977, the Liberal Premier of the day said that we moved from one expensive fossil fuel to another, moving from oil to coal. And one of the things that at that time the utility of the day was asking for an extremely high rate increase, but at the end of the day, it was given to them of a 47.2% increase. And the Liberal Premier of the day said, well, at least it wasn't as much as the utility had asked for. Madam Speaker, that's the type of thing that we can expect from the Liberal Party. Continuing to move down a road that wouldn't see a benefit to Nova Scotians, Madam Speaker. This project of the Muskrat Falls is an Atlantic Canadian solution, Madam Speaker, to an Atlantic Canadian problem. One of the things that the Liberal Party does not mention, Madam Speaker, is the issue of the greenhouse gas emissions reductions that the federal government is asking all provinces to imposing on us of talking about what their plan would be to get us to where we need to be by reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. The Liberal Party doesn't talk about that. They don't talk about how they would do it. They don't have a plan. They don't have a plan. Actually, you know what? That's not necessarily true. They do have a plan, Madam Speaker, and it's on their Liberal Party caucus website. And what it says is that they would bring in deregulation, Madam Speaker. Right. It says they would do that. That's what they would say, Madam Speaker. The other thing that they say that they would do, but we've already actually done it, was ensure that executive bonuses aren't included in the rate application. We did that. The NDP government did that, Madam Speaker. The other thing that it said, Madam Speaker, the other thing that it said it would do is it would require cutting waste from the Nova Scotia Power. I don't disagree with that, Madam Speaker. I don't disagree with that. The reality, though, Madam Speaker, is that already happens. The Utility and Review Board requests that information and requests for the utility to do that. But the last point, Madam Speaker, that they say that they don't agree with. They say, no, we agree with Muskrat Falls, Madam Speaker. We agree with it. That's what they say over there. That's what they say over there. But when they go out and they talk to Nova Scotians, they say, and this is what they say on their website, Madam Speaker, they say, provide cheaper, cleaner energy by importing power from Hydro-Quebec. That's it, Madam Speaker. That's the only thing they talk about. They don't talk about Muskrat Falls. Well, I'll table this, and this is what it says, Madam Speaker. It says it in black and white, Madam Speaker, exactly what it says. And this was taken on February 1st, 2013, Madam Speaker. That's the date of it, Madam Speaker. And that's what the difference is, Madam Speaker. Their energy plan is less than 100 words, Madam Speaker. Less than 100 words. You can put their energy plan in a tweet. Madam Speaker, that is what their energy plan, that's what their energy plan is, Madam Speaker. They chirp on, Madam Speaker, they chirp on about their energy plan. They have no plan, Madam Speaker. We have a comprehensive plan. This government has a comprehensive plan to get Nova Scotians off of coal, the international fossil fuel market, Madam Speaker. So this is what they would do, Madam Speaker. You know, I remember back on the day, it was January 24th. It was January 24th of this past year when Hydro-Quebec, in fact, informed their rate base that they were asking, they asked their rate base to reduce their consumption on those days, 24th, 25th, and 26th, because they could not produce the power needed. In fact, Madam Speaker, they turned off their headquarters logo at their headquarters, Madam Speaker. Why did you do that? Because they couldn't produce enough energy for their own people, Madam Speaker. So the reality is that let's think about this for a minute. Nova Scotia and Quebec roughly have about the same weather patterns. We have cold winters, Madam Speaker. We have cold winters. We use the energy that's needed at the exact same time. So how could we, if they can't produce their energy for themselves, how would they get it? How would it become a reliable source of energy for Nova Scotians? The reality about the Maritime Link project, Madam Speaker, is that this is putting Nova Scotia into an energy loop. Yeah. Right now, Madam Speaker, we are at the end of a line. That's right. We are at the end of a line. We've been for years, Madam Speaker, at the end of a line. Whatever policy decision that the Liberal Party has made, we have always been at the end. We've always been at the bottom. You know what, Madam Speaker? This government is moving Nova Scotia forward on things like energy, on things like healthcare, on economic development, on our finances, Madam Speaker. They can't handle, Madam Speaker, they can't handle the fact, that we are bringing in a balanced budget next week. That's right. They can't handle it, Madam Speaker. They can't handle it. We are one of only 2 provinces, maybe 3 in the country, to bring forward a balanced budget. That's right. Madam Speaker. That's the reality, Madam Speaker. We are going through some of the worst economic, the economic depression that we've gone through since 2008. We've been able to protect programs, Madam Speaker. So, you know, Madam Speaker, moving forward on the Maritime Link is something that will give stable, reliable rates for Nova Scotians for 35 years, Madam Speaker. For 35 years. For 35 years. Nova Scotia is being recognized as leaders in this, Madam Speaker. Leaders in this, Madam Speaker. In 2009, the question that I want whoever stands up and chirps on from the Liberal Party, what I want to know is what will the Liberal Party do? What will the Liberal Party do with the regulations that the federal government, what the federal government is bringing down to the provinces in regards to the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions? What will they do? They have no plan, Madam Speaker. Like everything else, Madam Speaker, they write it on the back of a McDonald's takeout bag. They write it on the back of a McDonald's takeout bag. And you know, the reality, Madam Speaker, is that this plan, the plan for lower power rates for Nova Scotians, is ultimately what will move Nova Scotia forward. But you know the other thing, Madam Speaker, that they can't handle is that we remove the HST off home heating, Madam Speaker. And if the Liberals ever had their chance, the one message that I will continue to talk to my constituents is that if they had their chance, they would put it back on.
Recognize the honourable member for Dartmouth East.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, almost the only thing that the member for Hammonds Plains Upper Sackville said that was correct is that many of the NDP members are almost at the end of the line, and they won't be here in a few months, and he might be one of them. You know, it's unfortunate that the member from Hammonds Plains Upper Sackville is obviously a victim of the cuts to the literacy programs this NDP has had, because he can't even read the website of the Liberal caucus and get the information. So, you know, Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, you know, he talks about the letter. In fact, I actually tabled the rest of the information later, so he obviously hasn't read that either. And I know it's tough when they get the talking points from a communications staffer and just rely on those when it's somebody and with that 300% increase in Communications Nova Scotia, it's probably part of the problem is they don't know what they're talking about half the time. Let me start by saying, you know, let me quote the Herald here, and I will read this paragraph and table it. February 28th, in fact, Mr. McNeil hasn't ruled out Muskrat Falls, but hasn't accepted the case for it as proven either. He has been mostly a critic of the government for being too uncritical in its support of the project and not doing enough to examining the alternatives such as purchasing power from Hydro-Quebec. So the NDP's ad bashing of Liberal leader for talking to Hydro-Quebec is preposterously silly. And I will table that. You know, Madam Speaker, let's be abundantly clear here. You know, I'm going to give you an example. The NDP want to say they're putting their hands all wrapped around this deal with Emera. They can't tell us what the price is. Even the consumer advocate has said that's a problem. Almost every intervener, with the exception of the Energy Department, has said that's a problem. They've said they haven't had enough time. They've said that's a problem to examine the details. We will not actually be told the rate until 2017. That is a problem. We have spoke loud and clear that having a link there makes a lot of sense, but it doesn't make sense to ask Nova Scotia ratepayers to pay 100% of the cost of a link that will ultimately be owned by the people of Newfoundland. Most of the economic, the former gentleman wishes to speak about the economic benefits, and you know what? I was up in Newfoundland, and there will be a lot of economic benefits in Newfoundland. The dam, in fact, some of the dam work is already under construction. But he wants to talk about differences. Ask him why the NDP and the Energy Department refused the Cape Breton Explorations Project, which guaranteed a fixed rate for exactly the same amount of energy as the Muskrat Falls project in perpetuity, not just for 35 years, and at a guaranteed fixed price at a lower total cost than is proposed by Muskrat Falls. With 100% of that economic development, 100% of those jobs in Nova Scotia, in Cape Breton. This was a government who decided to put Cape Breton under the bus when it came to energy in favor of Muskrat Falls instead and tying us to that. So maybe he should explain to the people in Cape Breton who were going to invest in that project, who had proposed that project, why he thought putting the money in Newfoundland, Nova Scotians' money in Newfoundland, was better than putting it in Cape Breton. I'd like to see him go door to door and explain that one. You know, Madam Speaker, at the end of the 35 years of this deal, Emera and the new corporation they've created have admitted they have no plan to deliver energy to Nova Scotia. So this is a short-term plan in energy terms. When certainly we've said that, and we've been on the record in here, that one of the things we should be looking at is, as part of the solution is importing energy from Hydro-Quebec. It's interesting to hear the member for Hammonds Plains Upper Sackville criticize that, since the Premier has said the exact same thing. The Premier has said that that should be part of the plan, and he is on record repeatedly in this House saying that. So for the member to criticize that, he's criticizing his own Premier. He talks about energy shortages. Well, at this moment, there are 2 dams under construction by Hydro-Quebec, one of them for export purposes only. That is the Romaine Dam. There is also the East Main Dam that is under construction. Both of those dams are exactly the same in terms of greenhouse gas emissions as Muskrat Falls. In fact, many people have argued that the greenhouse gas emissions would be much less. And in fact, when you look at the international studies on greenhouse gas emissions related to massive hydro projects, the proposal that was made by Cape Breton Explorations for the exact same amount of energy was actually fewer greenhouse gas emissions than the Muskrat Falls project. Furthermore, this is a government that wants to tie our hands. Instead of saying, no, you know what, the deal should be the alternate. The alternate deal that Emera suggested that said, we'll get a fixed price and we will buy the energy that we receive. That would have meant that we only pay for what we receive. No, instead, we're going to pay 100% of the cost of the undersea link. And then what's going to happen is that when we get the power outages on the line that might be 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, that Emera, Nova Scotia Power, Nalcor all admit are possible and probably likely a few times during this deal, that were in the Manitoba Hydro study, it's Nova Scotia that will suffer the brownouts. Why? Because we don't have the other options. We don't have the replacement. There is no guarantee in that deal. In the IRs that just came from Nova Scotia Power, they were asked about this, and they said, well, Nalcor will have to make that up at the end of the 35 years. Well, that's great that, you know, more Nova Scotians will have to sit here and be cold in their homes for 30 or 60 days during a period of brownouts and rolling blackouts that this government has delivered to them. We'll make that up in 35 years. Don't worry, you can be cold for 30 to 60 days because we'll get that energy back in 35 years. That is not a deal that makes sense for Nova Scotians, and these are the questions that the Department of Energy, the Minister of Energy, and the Premier are refusing to allow be answered at the Utility and Review Board. And maybe they can be answered. Maybe there are solutions to this. Maybe there are ways to make sure that the potential issues with this deal can be resolved. And that's what we've said. But you can't do it with an artificial timeline that requires the Utility and Review Board to make a decision before the final capital costs are even in this fall. They don't even know how much this project is going to cost until this fall. So instead of an opportunity to create a circle where we would be able to export tidal energy from this province, where we would be able to harness new energy options in places like Spring Hill or Cape Breton or many other places in this province, instead, what this minister and this government wants to do is tie us to what may be the worst possible deal in terms of Muskrat Falls. And the worst possible deal because the Premier refuses to answer the questions or he doesn't know the answers. The Minister refuses to answer the questions or he doesn't know the answers. And I'm not sure which is worse. Which is worse, that they don't know the answers and they're claiming that this is the greatest deal since sliced bread? Or is it the fact that they're hiding the answers from Nova Scotians because they don't want them to know? You know, when you listen to what's being said by the Premier in this province about the deal and this energy minister, it's a whole different story they're saying up in Newfoundland. You go to St. John's and you can sit there and you can listen to the online shows on the computer if you want. they are on there answering the question saying, oh, don't worry, Nova Scotia will have to find its own power when there are brownouts. Nova Scotia will have to sort out its own issues. That's what they're telling Newfoundlanders. Well, the problem with that is that means that 8% or 10%, or actually if you talk to Emir, it might be 15 or 16% when they buy the other excess. They say, well, that's going to be Nova Scotia's problem to find that energy. Well, guess what? Without entering into some of those agreements now and looking at those options, there won't be another option. Without looking at what is our plan 35 years from now, when that link suddenly is, the link nearly comes to the end of its useful life, and the energy is being primarily supplied to support the Labrador mining interests, which you can sit here and say, oh, well, that just may happen. Well, Nalcor is out there selling it to Nova Scotians. The Premier of Newfoundland is telling people in Newfoundland and Labrador that the most important reason for this project, this Muskrat Falls project, is not only taking Hollywood offline, but so that when these new nickel mining interests in Labrador come online, they will be able to supply the energy there. Well, that's great if you live in Newfoundland. But I'm sorry, you're getting thrown under the bus if you're here in Nova Scotia, because there's no plan, and repeatedly, this government admits they don't have a plan, they don't have a solution, and so instead, they go running scared, and they just throw everything at the wall that sticks. On one minute, they're saying, oh, well, you support Muskrat Falls. Next saying, you don't support it. They don't even know. At the end of the day, this is a government that is backed a project without having the answers. There is no reason why they shouldn't have sent it to the board and said, you know what, we'll watch it and we're going to give it, as long as the board needs to look at that project, we will give them to look at that project, because Nova Scotians deserve answers. This government won't give them to them. Thank you.
Now recognize the honourable member for Argyle.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And I do get a kick on opposition days when we do have the opportunity to speak to government resolutions, and they are entertaining, at the best of times. And I know full well that I'm probably not going to take up my full time on this one, because I don't want to give too much credence to what the member from Hammonds Plains Upper Sackville was talking about. Madam Speaker, it is obvious, and it's been shown time and time again that both the Liberal and the NDP energy plans will be driving up power rates. Madam Speaker, it seems like these two high-cost twins can debate on who is worse all they want. But, Madam Speaker, it will help no one in Nova Scotia. Only our plan, in our estimation, and then by others, is that our plan will freeze power rates. Energy rates have increased 28%, for shame, 28% in the last 4 years since this government has taken power. 28%. Emera has said that rates will increase 2 to 3% for the balance of the decade under the NDP's energy plan. And not knowing the exact cost of the Muskrat Falls mega project, the energy coming from it, is another poor example of the fiscal management of this government. While the NDP are poor managers, the Liberals do take the cake. Well, I know the member for Truro was talking about balanced budgets, and I was part of a government that balanced it 8 times. 8 times. I was in government 8 times. It was the public accounts, from message from the minister, and I'll table this one's from public accounts signed by a certain Minister of Finance. The public accounts for the year ending March 31st, 2009 reported a surplus of $19.7 million. Madam Speaker, I've been proud. I was proud to be a part of that government. I'm getting dragged down the rabbit traps that I really didn't want to get dragged down on this one. And some other day I'll plan to go down those rabbit tracks once again, but I'll try to stay away from it, because really I was talking about the Liberals on this one, so I really don't want to be drawn off of that one. Liberals take the cake. While the Liberal leader has no original ideas, only they could take a failed idea from one province and make it the centerpiece of their energy policy. In fact, it takes a special kind of talent to borrow a policy from another place that abandoned it because it was proven to drive up rates and impede the move to cleaner energy at the same time. That's what the deregulation plan, or whatever the opening up the, how do they say it? I forget how they put it. They try to avoid the deregulation issue, but quite honestly, that is what the Liberal plan is. The Honourable Liberal Leader's lack of decision on several issues and bad decisions, of course, on others shows that he's purely suited to manage a modern economy. Modern economies are full of complex decisions, mega projects, and of course, tough negotiations. And managing the economy requires dealing with such a sad track record of challenges. Nova Scotia is the last in population growth in Canada, has the oldest population in Canada. Nova Scotia has the highest tax rates among all provinces in Canada, and Nova Scotia is the highest power rates in Canada. And oh yeah, Nova Scotia is the last in GDP growth among all provinces in Canada. We've had 4 years of this government to show us how devastating it is to entrust those problems with an inexperienced government. God forbid that we do it again. Imagine how bad things would be if a leader that has no practical experience would suddenly become premier, which is exactly kind of what happened when this gang took power in 2009. We surely do not want to repeat it once again. With those quick comments, I want to thank the members for their indulgence. I want to thank the member for Truro for those rabbit tracks, because I do enjoy the debate with her. But with those few words, I will take my place.
Thank you. I want to thank all members for an engaging debate this evening, and we stand adjourned to meet again tomorrow at 11 a.m.